Let's go to a civilized country that's better than the United States, but that's not saying much these days. Mark Breslin is founder and president of Yuck Yucks, the largest comedy club in North America. How are you? It's good to see you, sir.
I'm fine. It's nice to see you too. I'm glad to see we're going from this is revolution to this is accommodation. What can I do?
Now, as a Jew, would you pimp out? Would you turn your back on your people? They're to make a buck.
Well, I've been doing that most of my life since so many comics are Jewish. And I'm not really sure what you mean by that, and I'm not sure what you mean by the context of that. Do you mean am I the guy who would stand in the window, pointing up at in front of the window, pointing up at Anne Frank's attic, going, "She's up there"? A little money, please. Do you mean it that way? I'm not sure what you mean, David.
Tell the Pia Zadora story. And was it you?
The Pia Zadora story? What's the Pia?
Where she played Anne Frank on Broadway.
Oh, I don't know that story. I'm sorry. I never told you that story. That didn't come from me.
This is probably not true. Pia Zadora is very talented, but she had a sugar daddy who she married, who pushed her and spent a lot of money on her. Even though she had talent, there was resentment because she was being financed. Rickless or somebody, I can't remember the name.
Shalom Rickless. And he was very rickless in the way he conducted her career. And you say she's very talented, but I don't remember the talent part. I remember the firm butt of Pia Zadora. That's what I remember. Now, Oscar Wilde said beauty is a form of genius. So maybe she is a genius. Her butt is a genius. Let's say that. But I don't know this.
So I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt that she was unfairly hated because she had a rich sugar daddy as a husband. And she was appearing as Anne Frank on Broadway. And about 20 minutes in, somebody screamed from the balcony, when the Nazis come in, she's in the attic. She's in the attic.
Now I've heard the story. I do remember that story, but I don't think I'm the one who told it to you. Right. It is a funny story. No, I thought it was true. Maybe it is true. I mean, I thought she was a terrible. What's the name of the movie that she starred in? It was her own. It was her vehicle that Rickless put together for her, and it was unwatchable.
Right.
Somebody will be at their Butterfly. There it is. Thank you.
Pia. Who named her? Pia.
Pia. Well, Pia is a Scandinavian name.
For pee.
Yeah, it means urinator.
Urinator.
She used to urinate on Mechoulam Rickless all the time, evidently. And when she was finished, she would say, "Well, you're no Danny Thomas, but one is the loneliest number."
He was called Pua Zadora. Now I have to plug St. Jude. I have a rule on this show. Every Danny Thomas joke, he is responsible for St. Jude. They do not turn away a sick child. Give to St. Jude. It is one of the best charities you can give to. And not just because it gives me license to make Danny Thomas glass coffee table.
And in fact, to tell you the truth, I have supported St. Jude, and I have a little plaque on a coffee table there.
Please, I don't ask you for much on the show. Actually, I am beginning to ask
a lot, actually, but I will not do any more Danny Thomas jokes this show.
No. Every time somebody makes a Danny Thomas joke, an angel gets a wing, and
it's covered in poo, and it's very hard to fly when one of your wings is covered in poo. I find. That's why you see all those pigeons in those bird baths. Because Danny Thomas had been there earlier.
Now, give to St. Jude's. Please. He set up St. Jude's. I'm sorry?
It's a good charity.
It's a great charity.
Yeah,
And $5, whatever, give to St. Jude's. How are things in Canada? How is Yuck Yucks? You're open and people are going out and laughing and seeing live comedy and
we're open. Fewer people are going out than before the pandemic. People still haven't gotten used to the idea that they can go out. Not everybody feels comfortable. Canadians, I wouldn't say we're more conservative, but we're more we're more likely to watch ourselves. When we don't take as many risks. We're risk averse, the Canadians, and so it's been a while.
I have a theory.
I just spoke to the guy who runs my Halifax club, and I said, "How are you?" He said, "I got the COVID." I said, "Where did you get it?" He said, "I went to Prince Edward Island for the weekend." Now, Prince Edward Island is one of the provinces of Canada. It's the smallest of all the provinces. It's a tiny little island. You could drive from one end to the other in 4 hours. And it has the lowest rates of COVID in maybe North America. And he got it there. So,
wow. And it must be beautiful.
Oh, it's a gorgeous place. I went there. I was recovering from a nervous breakdown when I was, 22 or 23. And a friend, a girl that I knew, had a place there. Her parents had a place there. And I went and stayed there and, played with worry beads for 3 weeks and then felt better and came home.
What do people do? What do they do? They fish?
Oh, you mean what do they do for a living, or what do they do?
What do you do?
Yeah, there's fisheries, there's tourism because it's a beautiful place. There's a big theater festival there, and they play Anne of Green Gables every single year, full of Japanese tourists. Because the Japanese, love Anne of Green Gables. They love that story. I think they love the schoolgirl uniform, personally. That's only me. You're laughing, but...
I have a theory about Dave Chappelle's last special.
Okay.
He, arguably the best comic of the past 30 years, arguably, he can defy an audience and do whatever he wants. But a comic is a comic, and what works, you keep in the act, and what doesn't work, you take out. It's the scientific method. He's above the scientific method where he'll decide to keep something in the act, even if the audience isn't enthusiastic. But for the most part, a comedian keeps what works. Is that fair to say?
Generally, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The conservative bent that we saw in his last special, and it was conservative, is that partly due to the fact that he built that special playing to audiences in the time of COVID, and that in 1920 or 21, most of the people who would be going to a comedy show would be young and right-wing?
Maybe. It's also possibly the place that he was working that material out, which is in the middle of Ohio.
Or Texas, also Texas.
Which has, because he lives in the middle of Ohio. He lives in the middle of nowhere, and he has some stages that he works out in. And I'm wondering whether that affects it as well. He's not working the stuff out in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago, and that could be. But I think he also fancies himself a bit of a populist, not necessarily a right-wing populist, but a populist.
Right. Do you think that we're going to see mainstream comedy move a little more to the right temporarily, because mainstream comedy audiences tend to be those who aren't afraid of the COVID, they'll go out and see comedy?
No, many of those people who go out are vaxxed. Certainly everybody who came to my club.
I'm talking about last year. I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about last year.
They
that
were
were.
all black.
I'm sorry.
Well, in my clubs, you couldn't get in unless you were vaxxed. Remember? So, and I thought that was true in many, many states in the United States.
Right.
No, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that that's exactly true. No, I don't necessarily see that. Plus, there's so much comedy. It's on such a wide berth of a rainbow that it could be. You'll see everything. I mean, do you think watch people like Samantha Bee or Trevor Noah or any of those kinds of late night talk show hosts and see if they start to drift toward the right. And then I would say maybe you have a point. But without that happening,
that's different. That's different.
Well,
that's top-down comedy, whereas stand-up comics are from the ground up.
Yeah, I've told this before, David, and I don't think you go to enough shows anymore. If you go to any of the shows, you will find absolutely no politics whatsoever. They're not talking about any of this stuff whatsoever. They're talking about getting laid, masturbating. Those are the women. And they're not really talking about what's going on. It's people are coming to comedy clubs as a relief to get relief from what's going on.
Right. And so much like music, comedy can be pretty much about the same thing. Love, sex, and hatred for a lover who broke your heart.
It's the standard stuff. It's never really changed. You know, I mean, every once in a while, a song like, you know, Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime comes out and kind of changes the world. And in the 60s, there was a lot of music that came along that did change the world, but it's rare and it applies more to music. I've said this before. The revolutionary impulse expresses itself in music way more than it expresses itself in comedy. Because comedy is
nobody knows what you're really saying. You can hide behind. Nobody knows what you're saying with music. You can't quite hear the lyrics, so you don't know exactly what somebody's saying.
Right? No, it's because music is a chant, and it's really easy to pick up on a political position when it's a chant. You can't chant your comedy. It's not, and comedy is also always based on some kind of ambiguity. So even when you strike a position, there's always a tinge of maybe to it. So I just don't see comedy as having a great deal of political impact, except these late night shows where they're right on the money, right on the time. And, you know, 2 days later, it's dead. The joke is dead because the world has changed just that small amount.
A couple of things. Dave Chappelle saying gender is fact is not comedy because there's no ambiguity there. You say comedy has to have some kind of ambiguity.
Well, I'll give you the gender is fact till you go into a prison and you spend a couple of years there, and then gender isn't a fact at all. And you realize gender is really fluid, and gender is full of fluids. Some of it yours, some of it your bunkmate.
You're right. You're right. As for comedy,
I believe that gender and these gender issues are often situational. People who think that they are one thing in different circumstances turn out to feel differently.
Okay.
For me, it's always been, if I can personalize it, which I love to do, for me, I mean, it's always been that I knew I was a guy and I knew I was a man, but my problem was I wasn't a man like all the other men I knew. And I somehow wanted to be a man, but I didn't want to be a man like them. I didn't like sports. I didn't like drinking. I'm not part of any kind of bro culture. So how do you manage to be a straight man who loves Sondheim and shopping for clothes and still feels like he's a man? It's always been problematic for me. Still is.
Me too.
Yeah,
I had a play date. Huh?
Of course, you're a creative guy, so that makes it difficult for you.
We had a play date up in Albany with some new friends, and one of them was like a real man who is like I would want him around to protect me, and I was around this guy, and I thought he's a man, and I should feel like a man, but compared to this guy, I don't, and I cowered in the corner. Okay, back to comedy for 1 second, because I think we're on to something, Doctor. I believe there are two types of comedy. There's top down and bottom, and then the bottom up. And I think Dave Chappelle is a power bottom. That when he had his show on Comedy Central, he walked away, and that was top down. You know, he walked away from $50 million, having a show on Comedy Central. You tell the audience what is funny. You don't care what the studio audience thinks. It's fascism. I'm telling you what is funny. That's why Colbert, that's why Samantha Bee, that's why Jon Stewart, who I reluctantly have to, his new show, the new iteration of it is excellent. It pains me to.
I just saw it for the first time yesterday. I saw his show on the stock market, and I thought it was excellent.
It was excellent.
It was excellent.
The story's a year old, and he has $1 million writing staff. You think he could have talked about Ukraine this
Maybe
week?
That's the next show.
Well, he was talking about short squeezes and GameStop, and
a lot of people don't know that story, David.
A year old. He had
but a lot of people don't know that story, and they have to catch up with it to understand what's happening with the stock market and with the economy and how it's manipulated.
It was the Jon Stewart who I hated because I was jealous, not the Jon Stewart who I hated because he's a horrible human being and anti-union.
I've never met the man. I don't know anything about him, actually.
But I recommend the show. This new iteration, it's the old Jon Stewart, and you if you don't look too closely, you'll almost forget that he's an ignoramus, which he is, by the way. It's worth watching. That segment was great. He's still not an original thinker, but it's great. And he's still anti-union, but his show is great. So, but that's top down. You can't do that kind of comedy in a comedy room. And Chappelle walked away from a television show and went into the clubs, and he's a power bottom. He's coming up through the clubs and putting it up on Netflix. Dave Chappelle is a power bottom.
By the way, did he do this through the clubs? Did he practice it? I was always under the impression that he was kind of arrogant enough to just do it without even working out the material, because I've always thought that he was so loose that it sounds like he really hadn't worked it out. That's my big complaint with, there's always this debate. Who do you like better, Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle? Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle? Because, hey, they're the only two black people in show business. Obviously, those are the two we have to compare. So, and I've always been a Chris Rock fan more than the Dave Chappelle fan, because Chris Rock is so tight. Every word has a purpose and every joke has a purpose. Whereas Chappelle,
he's tight, he's not a power bottom then.
I'm sorry?
If Chris Rock is tight, I wouldn't consider him a power bottom.
It depends on the lube and the size of the microphone. Right? Right. Remember those old microphones from the 60s? They were like long and narrow. Dick Clark used to use them all the time.
Gene Rayburn.
Yeah, that kind of
long. It was long.
Long, and it was a long like cylinder.
Power mic.
I like those microphones.
Me too.
They fit really well.
Hey, how many mics do you go through a year at a club?
Well, we usually have 3 microphones and 2 stands in most of the clubs. That's in case we have a guitar act. Otherwise, people just keep using the same mic, and they're trained not to drop them, throw them, but inevitably somebody does. So I would say we go through maybe 2 or 3 mics a year.
And the windscreen, how often is that changed?
Never. I like to get it so full of virus and bacteria that you could actually squeeze it like a loofah and have it all drip all over yourself. Sometimes, in fact, when I'm really thirsty and the Coke machine is just too far away, I just take off the windscreen and I put it in my mouth.
So advice, you teach at Humbert College, you teach comedy.
Yeah, well, right? I act as a mentor more than a teacher. There is a teacher who actually goes through the kids act. I shouldn't call them kids. They're in their 20s, who go through the students' acts line by line, working with them. I give them kind of a bigger overview, like go faster, or you should be going slower, or why are you talking about this when you're clearly not interested in it? Talk about what half the battle is getting them to talk about what they're interested in. And half of that battle is getting them to figure out what they are interested in.
Right. So 2 questions about making it. Forget being an artist, just making it. I have a theory. You're a club owner. I'm just starting out. Now, you can get a big laugh. Since the invention of the microphone, a comedian can get a big laugh by staring at the audience and dropping the mic. Right? Somebody says something stupid, you're heckled, or you say, President Reagan said this today. And instead of saying, can you believe it? You just drop the mic and the audience laughs. Always laughs when you drop the mic. When in trouble, drop the mic because it makes a funny sound. However, the club owner, my theory, I've never done a mic drop.
I've never done it either. When I was starting, there was a guy who was really funny.
Let me ask you the question first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
You run Yuck Yucks.
Yeah.
A mediocre comic like myself comes to your club.
Not mediocre. You were never mediocre. You were a lot of things, but you were never mediocre.
Well, let's just say a young comic. I was never young either, but
think of it your way.
I come to your club and I drop the mic. Isn't that a fuck you to you if I drop the mic? Because I may break your mic.
No, he just doesn't understand that I might have to go replace it at a cost of whatever it is, $48. And I suppose I should charge him if the mic breaks. I don't, but he shouldn't do that. Well, I approach him and I say, don't drop the mic. I'm only going to have to pay for it unless you want to pay for it. And I try to reduce it to that very simple economic transaction because he's being unprofessional unless it's his mic. By the way, I've always encouraged, and I've never succeeded, in trying to get the comics to bring their own microphones. Everybody should have their own mic the way they have, gunslingers have their own gun, or maybe maybe a better example is if you're playing pool, you bring your own stick, you bring your own cue. You don't go for the one that's, on the rack that everybody has touched and used and half broken. Bring your own mic. It's not even that expensive.
What a great idea.
And no one will do it. No, everybody's too lazy, too cheap, too this, too that. But I went back on stage, I would bring my own mic, especially these days.
Now, what if you're Sam Kinison, you're playing to sold out audiences and he's dropping the mic and breaking it at every show? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking, what a great way to spend $48. Do I care? I'm the promoter. I'm making thousands. I don't care about the $48.
Break the mic.
Second question. Stand on the mic. Do whatever you want to do to the mic. It's okay. Sammy, you coming back tomorrow? Great.
By the way, Peter Townsend breaking those guitars, smashing.
Yeah, well, there was a trick.
What was the trick?
They weren't the guitar. It wasn't the guitar he was actually using. It was an old beat up guitar, and he would surreptitiously switch it off, and then he would start bashing it. He's not gonna start bashing a really expensive guitar. The guitar that Jimi Hendrix set on fire at Woodstock?
Yeah.
Marzipan.
Sugar?
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
That one I don't know, because Hendrix didn't end every show with burning the guitar. That was kind of a special, but yeah, it was the stock in trade for him to do, for Townsend to do it. But I understood that he had fake guitars ready that he could do that with, so that he wasn't smashing up something worth thousands of dollars.
Wow. last question
Yes.
about making it as a stand-up.
Yeah.
If you were advising some young stand-up comic and you said, look, if you want to make a statement, go into politics or write a song. But if you just want to make people laugh and get wealthy and make people happy, is it fair to say, talk only about love, sex, relationships, and then the people you hate because they stopped loving you, talk about failed relationships, talk about love and the people you don't love. Isn't that the best way to make it in stand-up comedy?
No, and I can give you too many counter examples. I'll start with George Carlin. But no, that's not what I would say, because that's just too shallow. What I would say is your first goal is to get laughs. You've got to get the laughs. Before anything happens, you've got to learn how to be funny and how to make something funny. And then if you can layer on a political position or a social position or even an emotional position, so much the better, because when they go home, the stuff they're going to really remember in the end is something that may have touched their brain or their heart. But you've got to be really good to do that. That's your PhD.
Right.
Don't do your PhD before you do your BA.
Right.
That's what I would say. And by the way, I have to say that all the time at Humber when I talk to these students, because they're all woke and they want to, change the world. And I think that's great, but they got to learn how to be funny first.
Right. And you're not teaching kids at Humbert.
Meaning, they have to.
At Humbert, you would be teaching actual kids.
Yes, no, it's not Humbert, it's Humber, that's true. But one of my best students, Lolita, I can't remember her last name, but her first name suffices. Don't you?
Annabelle Lee, I believe. Edgar Allan Poe called her Annabelle Lee, I believe.
Right. No, I tell them to, by all means, to try to keep their passion for whatever they're passionate about. But also, I advise them not to expect too much, because the audience will sit there and they will agree with them as long as they're on stage. And then when they go home, they'll revert back to, the official CNN version of life.
Right. I was on the train. Can you indulge me for 1 second? Just sure. Because you're the only. Adlai Stevenson said that the cruelty of old age is there's nobody left to talk to. Is in Mort Sahl's book Heartland. And Mort Sahl is gone and Adlai Stevenson is gone and there's nobody left to talk to. And I was on a train and I apologize to my listeners, but I just wanted to tell Mark something I wrote to somebody that I felt really proud of. Okay? You got a minute?
Yeah.
This is self-indulgent.
Go ahead.
So there's a guy named Mark who listens to the show. He's an art historian and he does restoration. A lot of people who listen to this show as an audio podcast, they listen to it while they're working with their hands. And he is he restores art, and there was a party at the Met that I didn't go to. He had restored, I don't know, like a Rembrandt or something. And he's really bright. And on last week's show, we were talking about Alexander Graham Bell, and I said, I think Alexander Graham Bell went to France to study painting, or maybe it was Samuel Morse, right?
Yeah.
It was either Morse or Alexander Graham Bell who studied painting and was actually pretty good at it. So Mark, who listens, wrote to me, it was Samuel Morse, inventor of the Morse code, who went to France to learn how to paint and was actually a great painter. To which I replied,
I know it. Can I guess the punchline?
Please.
He was a pointillist. Like Seurat.
Well, I wrote. No, you're right. I love you. I love you for that. I said something to the effect of, whereas Samuel Morse painted with dots and dashes, Seurat was more of a minimalist and went only with the dots.
Okay.
But yours is better. And we've just alienated everybody. Everybody now
I have
hates
no
us.
idea what we're talking about.
And nor should they. Or maybe they should. I don't know.
They should, actually. Seurat is a brilliant artist. Everybody should just go online after the show and just look up Seurat and see what he does.
Yes. K. Seurat was his first name.
K. Seurat,
The first name was K. K. Seurat was his full. All right. Thank you. I love you for that. You know, sometimes I think I'm insane. I really do. And because sometimes you do some deep cuts. This is what I used to say to Dennis Miller. I said, "You can't fire me. I'm the only one here who gets your references."
What are you talking about? The references.
Yeah, I'm the only one, Dennis, who gets your references. If I'm gone, you're insane. I love you. Thank you.
I love you
Thank
too.
you for that. And you got me to say that. I hate saying that Jon Stewart did a great job, but his new show, they've revamped it. And even though he's a union busting, middle of the road hack who I can't stand, his new show is worth watching. Even though he's going to burn, even though he should burn in hell for the way he treats workers, and he's a fraud.
I know none of this. None of this. I know nothing about. I never met him in my life. I don't know anybody who worked for him. I just don't know. This is all news to me.
But his show is definitely worth watching, in spite of him.
Actually, Mark, I can clear that up. John once gave David 14 minutes on a 15-minute break.
What? 14 minutes, 15-minute break.
He thought it was 15. He only gave him 14, and David has been cursing his name ever since.
Oh, you're talking about the way the workers, he treats the workers.
Yes. It was just you. I believe you, David. I'm just pointing out.
I don't know about how people treat their workers, but I can tell you one thing's for sure. You can really tell what a comedian is like by the way they treat their writers. And one thing I always loved about Joan Rivers is that she treated her writers so well, and actually would rather be in the writer's room probably than any other room in the building. So, that means a lot.
I worked on the roast, and she came in and she would go through the jokes. And this is what she said. I like this. Mean. I like it. Mean. I want mean. And I went, wow, I just got my PhD from Joan.
It's so important because I know some people who worked for Johnny Carson in the writer's room. And I said, what is he like? And they went, I don't know. We've never met. And they worked for him for 11 years. Yeah. Because Johnny would only talk to the head writer. So, I judge these successful comics by how they treat the writers. No writers, no comedy.
Jon Stewart hates his writers, and the feeling is mutual, but none of them have the balls or the ovaries to go public with how horrible a human being he is. And he is a horrible human being. That being said, his new series on Apple is worth watching.
Yeah, I like it.
All news to me. Thank you. You guys have a great time. I'm going to go have some dinner.
I love you. Thank you.
Okay.